Hello again, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. We are delighted to welcome you as we kick things off here and move forward here in the summer of 2024. And we've got a really exciting guest for you today. We're usually talking to the guys, but we've got a female that I know that you're all going to know of and really going to be excited about hearing her incredible story in her life and all that she's continued to do in her journey through sports and life. And I'm talking about Jen Welter, who we'll get to in just a sec. But first of all, we say hello to Marnie and Marjorie. Hello, ladies. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Scott?
Oh, I can't complain. Nobody listens anyway, Marnie. You know how that goes, right?
And I'm doing great too. And it's great to have Dr. Welter here with us today.
Yes, indeed, for sure. And to the good doctor, we simply say, hello, hello, hello. It's great to see you. I mean, my gosh, I haven't seen you in years and you look great. How are you?
It has been far too long, Scott, but I'm doing well. This is like a family reunion for me. So thank you guys for welcoming me to the party.
Well, it's the trifecta and the good doctor, our special guest, and we're delighted to have you on board. I tell you what, Marnie, why don't you get us going and introduce Jen, and tell the world who we're talking to and what this is all about and her incredible history.
All right. So if I did like the proper introduction, I think we would be at 50 minutes. So what I'm going to say is I would just, it's a very long list of accomplishments and incredible things that Jen has done, aside from being just a really nice person and a good friend. So I'm really excited to have my good friend, who I now know also is your good friend, Scott, and Marjorie. My good friend, yes, she's a doctor, Dr. Jen Welter, join us. Jen is, one of these people that when you ask her, she's like, yep, I'll be there, what time, whatever it is. And that's really why I think she's been so successful with all the things that she's been able to accomplish. As we know, she is the first female coach in the NFL. So it puts goosebumps on my arms when I think about that and her accomplishments. And from there, I'm just going to pass the ball to you, Jen, and let you take it and run with it down the field.
I have done that. Generally, it's an interception on my part because, or a sack fumble. That's actually my favorite. I think that's more fun than an interception. I'm a defensive kind of gal, not defensive, but defensive. Get your minds right. Played 15 years women's tackle football, started with what was at that time the Mass Mutiny. They are now the Boston Renegades, one of the iconic franchises of women's football in the Women's Football Alliance. Then moved down to Dallas, played my first season with the Dallas Dragons, which they only made it 1.5 seasons. And then this was a crazy year, y'all. So 2004, I played spring with the Dallas Dragons and then went from that last game where we got beat worse than I think I've ever been beaten in my whole life. We had 13 players left by the end of the game. I even played a quarter on the offensive line. That's how bad it got. But I don't quit. A lot of people had quit, not quitting, led the team in tackles. And then that led to me leaving that field and having to go to an open tryout for the Dallas Diamonds. Like 3 days later, I was so sore from, getting trounced on. I still had the enemy's helmet on, and they had made an exception for me to try out for the Dallas Diamonds because season was right around the corner. And of course, you step into somebody's territory like that. The Dallas Diamonds were already like the team, right? And you step onto their territory, you're wearing a competitor's helmet. And it was one of those days, you could tell like certain vets were lining up so that they got to go against the new girl. And I tackled, I would say arguably the best woman to have ever played football, Jessica Springer, that practice. And all I heard was, ooh, new girl took down Springer. And I remember thinking, who's Springer? Oh, if you don't know Jessica Springer, you do not know women's football. There are certain names that should be one day in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, and hers would be one of them. So I played for them for about 10 years. With the Diamonds, really came into my own, won 4 Super Bowls with the Diamonds, 4 in 5 years, by the way. Played on the first and second women's U.S. national team. So won gold for Team USA in 2010 and 2013. With the 2010 team, this is a movie I will get made someday. I'm going to put it here. We beat the world 201-0 over 3 games. The most dominant performance by an American football team to ever play. I mean, you just can't beat that. You're going to tell me nobody scored on you in 3 games. And after that, got my PhD in 2013. So my second gold medal, also got my PhD. It was a pretty good year. Yeah, became a football playing doctor. So all types of crazy with that one. I mean, I could unpack that and I would be unpacking it for myself, right? Like I have a PhD and I still need to analyze myself. And then after that,
it's in psychology, right? It's in psychology.
Oh yeah. I think it's why I have an L couch here. So I can just move from one perspective to the other and analyze myself. Right. Hey, Papa. And then
that'll save you a lot of money.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I've got to, right? Like I played women's sports. I can't afford myself. Like that's the real part about it. And then I did one of the craziest things of my lifetime, which really not only changed my destiny, but shifted things for women in football was the season I played on the Texas Revolution and became the first woman to play a non-kicking position in pro football. And not for a day, not for a play, but for an entire year. And, those guys taught me so much.
Well, that's what I want to lead to with, those guys taught you. So I'm a little older and I didn't get the opportunities you had, but I wish I had because I loved football and I always wanted to play. I got to play flag football and at Arizona State, my team won the intramural championship. So that's as close as I got to, some kind of stardom. But we didn't, at least when I was growing up, we didn't have good coaches that were willing to kind of teach the game to women. So how did you learn it? I mean, you could play in the fields with the guys and all that, but that's field football. That's not the nuances of football and everything that even led you to be a coach with the Arizona Cardinals at that one training camp. So how did you learn everything you needed to know about football in order to be successful and have this career that you have right now? And did you have a mentor or how did that happen?
So football's a game. If you think you know all of football, someone will check you. Like it's a game you can literally love and learn your whole life. Every player or coach I've ever been around taught me something about the game, right? And those who play it. But for me, when I went next level in learning football was the 2010 U.S. national team because you got different coaches for the first time. And now these coaches looked at the game so differently than my other coaches. And my defensive coordinator became one of my best friends. Like his wife lovingly says she has 7 kids. Now they legitimately have 5. But he's 6 and I'm 7 because we just really hit it off. He made it so much fun to learn his game plans. They would do superheroes. Like I still remember the 2 best players on Finland were Venom and Viper, and they were basically exchangeable in what they did because of the way he made me feel about it. And I'd had some coaching situations where it was like, if I asked a question, it was like, why are you being difficult? Right? Which is really hard. You have coaches that just shut you down when you want to get better. Meanwhile, he was like, oh, that is such a great question. Here, let me show you, right? Like he's like a big kid and he's 6'4", so he's a really big kid. But he was one of those coaches for me. And then honestly, I'm going to be straight up. If you would have asked me anywhere throughout my career, if I was going to coach football, I would have told you no. I wasn't that captain of the team. I didn't want to call the huddles. I always felt like I had more to learn. I could be better. So I wasn't the outspoken, like, hey, you should do this person. Now, if somebody asked, like Marnie would say, like, you ask me for help. Oh, I'll help you all day. But I always felt like, and still do, that I have more that I could learn. So that wasn't my normal personality, even though I naturally did it, like, and mentor other people and would show them. But when I was on the men's team, it was actually Wendell Davis, former Dallas Cowboy, who came into the Texas Revolution the year after I'd played. Mm-hmm. We were at an event and I walked in and I hadn't seen my teammates in a long time. And you know how that is. They pick me up, toss me around like a football because relative to them, I am one. And he literally said, who is this girl that all my guys love? And his defensive coordinator said, oh, that's your running back, coach. And Wendell and I have talked about this extensively since then. He was like, Coach, I knew everything about you. I never thought the guys would love you like that. And it was him seeing how they cared about me that caught his attention. He sits me down and he grills me about what was good with the team, what wasn't, like about football, about all elements of the team. And I'm going to be honest, y'all, I survived a year playing against those guys. I was done. So I was going to burn that place down. Like, there were things that needed to change and I was going to tell them all of them because I had nothing to lose. Right. And I got to look out for my teammates, right? Because I am that one. I was a great lead blocker when I played and it's always been my persona. So I laid it all out to him. Then I was like, all right, Welter, out. Done. Mm-hmm. And the next day he called me and he said, you have to coach my football team. And I said, no. So what do you mean no? I said, no, girls don't coach football. Because there was no woman I could look at and say I wanted to do that. Now, thankfully, Wendell's a very direct guy. Some football coaches don't like to be told no. He said, not a lot of guys are going to give you this opportunity. You're taking this job. And I said, no. And I hung up the phone. The next day, he called me back and informed me he had taken the job on my behalf. He could teach me the X's and O's, but he could not teach how he saw those guys respond to me. And the job was now mine. And my only option was that I could quit. And then the entire narrative surrounding women coaching in men's pro football would be, we had a girl once and she quit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Let me ask you this. You said that you learned from different people. It didn't matter who it was. You learned something along the way.
Yeah.
Three people in your life that come to mind. I don't know if it's a mom, a dad, or whatever, but I mean, maybe a coach along the way, you're in high school. Three people that come to mind that really kind of set the tone as to who Jen Welter is today. Who might they be?
Oh, my gosh. There's more than that, because I think you pull little things from everyone, right? My parents I am a really cool mixture of them, right? My dad is a Vietnam vet who won a Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars. Mm-hmm. And as a kid who lost his father very early and then had an abusive stepfather, mm-hmm. he found his family in the war. Those are his boys. And he would die for his boys. Like, he's still, you still see that love, loyalty, and unending, like, right, wrong code mm-hmm. of the military, right? I got that from him, and lovingly he says, Jen, I got to tell you about me. I was a great warrior and a terrible soldier, which is also very much his daughter to this day, right? Some of the things I did the right thing, even though it was the very hard thing, and probably got knocked around for it because, being a first means you're always doing that. You're not following orders. You're leading from the front. And sometimes that means you're stepping on an IED, right? So I get that from him. He was also a doctor, a chiropractor, but very tough guy. And my mom is one of the kindest people you will ever meet. She can create beauty anywhere. She's an artist, and just super loving and understanding. So I think I married both of them. And then, I'm also a little sister. So there's a little bit of that because, my big sister, Rachel, was always the one I kind of looked up to. And throughout my football career, and Marnie could tell you this one, I've had football big brothers who literally would be like, yeah, that's Jen. Come on, Jen. She doesn't count. She's one of us. Go here, do this, talk to this person. And Scott, we were in Dallas. Avoid this one, talk to this one. This is good. It was very much like they would just look out for me and make sure that I was, invited to the golf tournaments or coaching at football camps before girls were doing that. So I am very much a little sister in that as well, like even throughout my career. I think Bruce Arians, I would have to say, not only did he shift me, but he shifted the game of football for all women. If he doesn't make that decision, the women that are in the NFL today are not there. Maybe they're there eventually, but they weren't there in that timeline. And he's such a wonderful example of leadership. Everybody always asks me, is he got that guy? Yeah, he's that guy, right? The guy you hope he is, he's that guy. He doesn't know how to turn it off. But when he set up that situation, he went to his locker room first and asked the players how they felt about shifting the culture in the NFL. And when they were behind it, then he moved things forward. So he really is a thoughtful leader on all of those things. And then the way he engages with everybody is something that I have taken, that really taught me. He was the most important person on that football field. And when I walked out there, closest I'd ever been to an NFL sidelines was the nosebleed section. I'm arguably in football stature, the least important person. He made sure to come over, come get me, walk me through the sidelines. He's cutting jokes. He's super nice and funny. And then it's like, coach, I want you to stay more. Can you be here? And in every meeting, he would ask for the opinions. He wasn't one of those leaders who didn't want to hear it and he wants to be up on high. Like, he would ask me questions like, hey, doc, so you got a PhD in sports psychology. What do you think about this? Or, man, you really had that guy's attention. Like, he was locked in. What were you saying? Like, wanted to get better in everything. And I think his value on people is something with me, like, that I will take with me for the rest of my life.
That's a wonderful experience because, it could have been very different. And you're talking about a real leader. And I think
he makes me want to be that in every situation, whether I'm running a camp or doing a keynote speech somewhere. Like, it's those things, those big far off things are great. But what matters is the people in them, right? And the interactions that we have with them and, showing up for our friends or taking a minute and, shaking a hand, sharing a moment. Like, I mean, he just made me think about leadership in a way that I think is really powerful.
Well, it sounds like even the little things matter to him. And to him, it might have been some of the little things, but for others, those are big things. And so they matter. So I'm wondering, though, as you're talking about everyone, I grew up loving football. Like I mentioned earlier, I wish I could have played tackle football, everything about it. I learned football from my mom and dad. Where did you first become interested in football? Who put that? How did football even get your attention in the first place?
Vero Beach, Florida. It's like Friday Night Lights. I mean, the whole town shuts down on a Friday night. And I remember sitting in the stands and thinking it was the biggest place. Because in Vero Beach, it's not college football. It's not pros. It's high school football.
Yeah,
and the high school football field is the biggest, thing there. And it's the brightest lights. And I looked down at the field and I looked at those guys and I thought they all looked like real life superheroes. And I wanted to be a superhero.
That you say this. If you could see right here, I have on my wall, that's a copy of the cover of my novel that I wrote. It was published by HarperCollins in 2018. And it's based on a true story of a woman who coached football, high school football. She coached the boys during World War II. And, I make references to it being the largest gathering place in the town and, things like that. So I totally understand what you're saying, and how appealing that might be.
Yeah.
And Vero Beach is where you were born and raised, right? Yeah. Mhm.
So,
Marnie, go for it.
well, first of all, I have to acknowledge that, yes, I think we all love high school football. There really is nothing like it. Getting the coaching and the kids and everything else is really something so special between the band and the cheerleaders and the community coming together to celebrate high school football is just a great thing. Marjorie's book, When the Men Were Gone, is extraordinary. And that's really, I was a fan of her book, and that's how I ended up meeting Marjorie and Scott and everything else. So sports really does bring everybody together. And that's how we met, because I'm a fan of yours, Jen, and all the things that you've done and all the things that you continue to do to make a difference in the world of sports, not only for women, but also for kids and families. So, all right, how do you think when you go out there and you meet young kids, what is like the one, do you have a message that you tell them, young girls and young boys too, because I know that they're all your fans, about like following your dreams? Or maybe it's a circuitous path to get, I don't know if you thought when you were watching Vero Beach football that you were going to be doing this. What did you think you were going to be doing? And like, how did that path end up? And what do you tell the kids when you're talking to them?
That's a great question, Marnie. Let me jump in here before you answer that, Jen, because I was going to ask something along the same lines. But what Marnie just asked, I was going to ask, because the simple fact that you said your mom and your dad were like role models. Your mom was soft-spoken, kind, just a caring woman. And yet your father was right there, and you said, I want to be like that, but I'm not a guy. I'm a female. So playing off what Marnie just asked, I'm really curious as to what you tell today's society, because there's a lot of kids out there. I'm doing a golf tournament on Tuesday, and it's for single parent families, and it's for kids that don't have a mom or a dad. What would you say to all those people? Great question, Marnie. Go for it.
I mean, for yours and Scott, like, I think it's really important. Like, people ask me about role model, right? And that's hard. I don't have just one, because there wasn't an archetype for like this woman and you could be her. That's one of the things that, they've proven from a research standpoint is so hard on girls, is there are not as many visible female role models, particularly in sports. Not that there aren't female role models, but the visibility is not the same. And so it makes it harder for girls to say, you know what, I could be her, right? And so I always encourage people to not have to look for one person to just have all the answers, because, I might learn this here and I might learn this from here, or something about this might strike me here. And I think we can have both a family of birth and a family of choice, right? What my dad found in the Army and his brothers in arms, I found in my sisters in the locker room, and then my brothers in the locker room, and then my nieces and nephews. It feels like that I coach now, right? Like, football is a big family. And, I don't have kids of my own. So I get to be that person for a lot of people, which is really special to me, right? Like, I cannot tell you the amount of girls and boys who call me auntie, right? Even one of my players who I drafted into the XFL, Pita Talmepinu, he literally wasn't going to play in the XFL because he had not immediately connected with the coach who he thought was going to draft him. And, you can't tell a Tongan to do something he doesn't want to do. I'm going to tell you that right now. If y'all didn't know that, the Island boys are different. They will go to war for you if they love you. If they don't, they're not going to do anything. And I remember calling him to lecture him because his paperwork wasn't in. We got off the phone. I call him and draft him the next day. And he's like, oh, coach, I knew you were going to draft me. He said, as soon as I talked to you, I felt like I was talking to auntie. And then I told my agent to put the paperwork in. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think really, for if that's not there in the way that, we would hope it would, like mom and dad are there, we find the people who are going to help us bring out the best. And I tell that to kids all the time, like, because I think the influences that we have are so powerful. And too often, people who don't have as big of dreams as us are the people who tell us what's not possible. And so when I talk to kids, I'm like, listen, you have got to find the people who are for you, right? Like I'm a hard coach on kids. And I literally tell them, I'm like, listen, I am doing you no favors by letting you be less than your best self. The best gift I can give you is to make you better. And guess what? The best people that you can be around in your life are the ones who push you to dream bigger and to do the work. And if somebody's not there for you in that way in your life, then they can be, high fives in the hallway, but they can't be in your corner. And it's not only okay to make that decision, it's important to make that decision. And whether I'm talking to adults or kids, that's something I have to even remind myself. Like if somebody is not going to build into the things that are really important in this world and they make you feel bad for having big, audacious dreams, then don't tell them first, right? And, let them read about it in the paper when it's done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think
at
that's
this
really
point
hard
in your
for
life,
kids.
do you look back and do you think, how did I get here? Wow. I mean, I have such an influence over so many people now, and I can really make a difference in a lot of lives. You said when you were younger, looking in the stands, sitting in the stands, you didn't ever think that you would someday coach. So, and you probably at that age didn't know you'd ever be a professional football player either. So, there probably weren't opportunities that you would have been aware of at that time. So, do you ever kind of want to pinch yourself and think, wow?
You know what? I certainly do think, how did I get here? And I never feel like I'm doing enough, to be honest. Like that's probably one of the biggest things with me. I think, coming out of women's football and then being a first several times, people don't necessarily know what to do with you, right? Like people think that there's a team of like agent, manager, PR, all of these things around me, and they're not. Because most people were like, that's interesting. We'll let you know later. And I'm like, even when I went to publish my book, they said, well, women in football doesn't sell. And I said, pretty sure I was first. So how many times have you tried? Right? Like everything that I've ever done in my life was literally a constant, whether it was me thinking it or someone telling it to me in the moment, right? Like, or me just being conditioned to like hear what I couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't do. And I just would kind of look and be like, okay, so what do I do now? Right. And some days that's easier than others, but I love the influence. I am honored by it. I think time is the one thing that, we don't get to spend it twice. And so when I'm investing in somebody, I want to be fully present and there. And I know that, them giving me their time and attention, it's a gift. And that's how I look at it. And I also think every single day I should be further and I should be able to do more things and help more people.
Very, very good. Let me ask you a couple of questions about your past as we continue this journey through sports and life with Marnie and Marjorie. One of the things that I always like to ask people is heroes, role models, but heroes. I mean, as a kid growing up, I'm going to date myself, but my hero was Mickey Mantle, New York Yankees. My gosh, Hall of Famer, incredible. I was near the end of his career when I first found out who he was and what have you. But I was number 7 in Little League my entire life. Little League, American Legion baseball, always number 7. And so when I got to meet Mickey as a broadcaster, as a sportscaster, oh my gosh, it was like it was the end of the world. This was Mick and his family. As a matter of fact, I think I mentioned this before. I got a call at training camp for the Cowboys down in Austin back in August of '95. And it's hard to believe. It's almost it's 95. Yeah, that's almost 30 years ago.
I mean, 30
and
years.
it was David Mantle's son, and said, Scott. I said, yeah, it's David. Yeah, how you doing? Well, not so good. We lost Dad last night. We're not inviting any of the media. Billy Crystal and Bob Costas are going to be the only two guys that are going to be invited, and they're going to both be speaking at the service. Would you come and sit with the family? Well, I had Joe Pepitone on one side, the old Yankee first baseman, and Reggie Jackson on the other side. It was incredible. But that's the thing. These are heroes that you look up to. And in some ways they become role models. Other ways they're great guys on the field, and off the field they're real turkeys, as you well know. How about you? What comes to mind? I didn't mean to go so long on that to ask that question, but did you have either male or female role models or people that we would know, iconic athletes, football or whatever it might be, that you looked up and thought, that's what I want to be, and because of whatever?
Well, I'll bring it a little bit more personal. I didn't have the far away ones as much. I was a young tennis player. That was my first sport. I was ranked in Florida. And I think part of that is that I got to see these women out in their power on TV, right? It was one of the only places you could do that. I have no gymnastic ability, though everybody thinks I was a gymnast. If I'm flipping, I got hit really hard. Like that's just the truth of the matter, right? Like there's no back flips, no back tucks. If it's a split, call 911, right? Like, let's just be really honest. So I didn't relate to gymnastics, although I thought it was fascinating. I'm like, how do they do that? But it wasn't like, I want to be her, because that's just not in my wheelhouse. But tennis was. And I remember watching, Chrissy Evert, Gabriela Sabatini, Zina Garrison, Martina Navratilova, all of those women. And they literally made me feel from afar that they were everything a woman could and should be. They were beautiful, they were strong, and they owned their stuff. They were kicking ass, right? So they really helped me decide what I wanted a woman to be. And then, media is so important in that, because then I remember it evolving when like Buffy the Vampire Slayer came out. Oh, I wanted to be Buffy. I wanted to fight vampires. I mean, I'm not going to lie, right? Like Sarah Michelle Gellar was a yes for me. Angel was a yes for me, right? And then Charmed. I always wanted to be Phoebe on Charmed. Like Alyssa Milano was a real life hero to me. And when I got to meet her, Scott, I'm going to tell you, I was like, and she's shorter than I thought. I mean, I'm 5'2", but she's probably like here. And we were introduced during the pandemic. Somebody put us on like an email chain and was like, you two powerful women need to know each other. And I'm thinking like, of course I know who she is, right? And she sends back, she's like, oh my God, I'm a huge fan of Coach Jen. I stalk her on Instagram all the time. And I was like, what? And then ended up, working with her kids. She has phenomenal kids, Milo and Bella, on some sports psychology stuff remotely, right? When we were all in COVID, and then got the opportunity, like we got to a point and I was like, I can't help Milo anymore unless I see him play. Like I can do so much over a computer, but I got to see the kid in action. And became good friends with her family. And then when I took over the Rose Bowl and did a day in the life, she was my co-host. So, and I've told her, I'm like, that character you played really had an imprint, because though that woman may have existed in real life, I didn't have access to her. But these powerful women in that role really imprinted me. And then from a practical, like who I got to meet and still have her signature was Michelle Akers. I got to participate in a soccer camp when I was in high school, and I got her signature on a ball. And in that moment, I think really realized how powerful it is to have women who are those icons in sports out on the field with you. And I look back at that, and that's one of the things that really moved the needle for me to found Gridiron Girls, because I wanted to do for as many girls as possible what she did for me that day.
Right. Makes all the sense in the world. Before I get to the last question I had for you, Marnie, jump in here. We need to hear from you.
I just want to hear Jen continue to talk. You don't need to hear from me. So, okay, well then, as far as like women in, let's just say professional football, why does it seem like there is such there's a huge barrier to entry, and why is that?
I think the biggest thing is like the feeder systems and relationships between leagues, right? Like when you look at Becky Hammon and her moving originally from the WNBA to the NBA, they were already in the same building, right? And they were already building relationships and mutual respect. So it's natural that the progression could be there, right? Like, and if I hadn't played on the field with those guys in the Texas Revolution, I never would have gotten the opportunity to coach. So we were both doing kind of the same groundwork. When you look at women in football, it's the only sport that doesn't have parity at any level, from peewees to the pros. And thankfully now, with the really the emergence of flag football being the fastest growing sport in the country, now little girls are starting to play younger, right? Girls like Kaylee Patterson and, you know, Mila Ramos, and I could go on, and, you know, and Kilolo Westerland, and these young girls, they're going to have a different life than women like me did, because the fluidity of the sport will be so much, you know, that early time on task, right? Like I could still pick up a tennis racket and go hit it to this day because of the early pathways that were developed. A woman like me didn't get to play football until I was 22, you know, and I lovingly say, like, I can only imagine what I would have done in football if I'd gotten to play earlier. Well, now these girls are getting to start early. Kaylee Patterson started with me at 4. She was at camp number 3 of Gridiron Girls, and she found the love of football that day. And she's 11, and she has been viral on ESPN several times. I mean, she is that monster, right? But the amount of time that she's played football already will, you know, by the time it's an Olympic sport in 2028, the level of football IQ she's going to be able to develop is just worlds beyond what I had access to. So these girls now playing early, having an opportunity to get college scholarships, and then to have a pathway to the Olympics, they will, through that, get more opportunities to, I think, coach, because that knowledge base will be there. And also it won't be so novel, right? Bruce Arians took a huge risk when he hired me, right? You have, you know, coach of the year with the Indianapolis Colts, you know, multiple Super Bowl winner. And yet, if things had gone terribly wrong, part of his narrative would be like, yeah, you know, he did all these things as a coach. Do you remember the time he lost his mind and hired that girl, right? Like that was the truth at that point. The narrative was, would guys in the NBA or in the NFL take coaching from a woman? And the sample size happened to be 1, right? And it wasn't that I wouldn't argue that I was the best woman in the world. I was the woman who was there, right? And I'm pretty darn smart and have done some pretty damn good things in football, but who knows if there were other women. But at that time, it just happened to be 1. And the stakes are way higher when the talent pool is way smaller. And now there's pathways and pipelines that I think we'll see many more women get to go, not where I went, but hopefully much further. And I tell all of them that don't set your sights on being me. You're setting your sights way too low. You know, blow me out of the water, blow the doors off what I did. But we'll see them continue to have that, because not only is the game changing, the access and opportunity are increasing, and the mindset is shifting.
You know, this has reminded me of back in 2018, I coached 1 season of college football for a small NAIA school. And I had people come up to me and say amazing things, but one thing I'll never forget, and you probably get this a lot, and that's why I'm asking. A father came up to me and he said, I love what you're doing for you, but you're also doing this for my daughter. And he said, my daughter is 6 years old. And because of people like you who are firsts, you're opening doors and opportunities for the girls that follow. You probably get that a lot, I would imagine. This isn't just Jen Welter coaching the Cardinals. This is somebody who's doing this for all the girls that are following. And as you're saying, make your sights even higher. Your opportunities are going to be bigger. Do you hear that a lot from people? You are doing this for my daughter.
Yeah. And for my son, because it's both. It's, it's opening a mindset for the girl, right? Like when she sees it, she thinks, oh my gosh, I could do that, right? She can see it. She can be it is a real thing. Because again, and I tell that lovingly, like I had never seen it. So I never imagined I could be it, regardless of how much I had done in football. But also every time a guy has an opportunity to be coached by a woman, it expands how he sees women or little boys looking on. It normalizes people in non-traditional roles. So I think, that's why I always say, like, it not only changes the game, right? The game of football in specific, but it shifts culture through the game of football in a place in a space where it's the last place most people expect women to be successful on the field and off. Like Marnie, your mom's a perfect example, right? Like it's not only on the field that they think this, it's off the field too. Right? Anywhere around the game until you see it and until women own it, then they can say, oh, it would never work. Mm-hmm. But once it works, you can't undo it, right? That bell cannot be unrung. You can't say it's impossible anymore because everything in the history of the world has been impossible until it wasn't.
Yep. Makes sense. I'll tell you what, we've only got about 4 or 5 minutes left. And I just want to make sure that we get in this one last question for sure. And that is your legacy. Everything you've shared with us. You brought your mom and your dad in. You brought some coaches in. You brought this person. You brought that people you've learned from along the way. And they all leave a legacy. And I mean, if I said Tom Landry, you're going to say one of the greatest coaches in the NFL, Dallas Cowboys, a couple of Super Bowl rings. What would you say about you? What your legacy is going to be? So long after you're gone and people say, Jen Welter, oh my gosh, she played football. She was a female. What comes to mind? How do you want to be remembered? And what are you proudest of for it?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I think, I think it's funny. It's easier to talk about other people sometimes than it is ourselves. But I would hope that people said, you know what, not only did she change the game, but she changed mindsets around the game. And she did it while being great to people. Because, it's hard, right? Being me is hard. It is hard. I lovingly at one time, like, when you're first, it means inherently only. And it also means that no one is neutral. Everyone has an opinion. There's very little like just, I don't know, Jen, never thought about it. Right? People are either, wow, she's this, that, and the other, right? Or it was the death of the patriarchy and the worst thing to happen to football. And how dare they? I mean, I used to get death threats regularly, right? Like, because it was so outside of the understanding of what some people wanted. So, for me, it's being in the XFL last season as the only female, first full-time position coach, right? Not an assistant. Linebackers are with me. And having Sam Acho come up to me and introduce himself because he listened to my players talk about me on interviews. And he'd never heard over and over from guys, she made me not only a better player, but to be a better person. Like, she pushed me on both levels. And those guys later talking to Sam, 3 of them told him I saved their lives that season or through the process of coaching them when they were struggling with things. And I would hope it's a mix of that, right? From a distance, you inspire, but that's not the trenches. You can give somebody inspiration, from a distance, right? You can give them permission to dream a dream that otherwise may not have crossed their mind. And I pushed myself every day to be that woman that I needed to see and didn't have, right? That's why I hate the role model question. And I also love it because one of my favorite titles is role model. But I also want really the people who were in the trenches to me, right? The women that I played with to say things like Olivia Griswold said to me when I was playing on the men's team, and there was backlash where some people were like mad it was me and not them. Again, maybe somebody else would have done it, but I was the crazy one who said yes, right? And she said, Welter, I'm so glad it was you because you represent us so well, right? Like it's never been about just me. I pushed myself to do things that are terrifying for the love of every woman I played with, right? And those are the things that I hope really resonate, because I think at times people have impressions of me from afar that don't necessarily, reflect who I am, right? Like my player, Scott, you would love this. You get it because you get the guys, and Marnie, you know me so well, you'll get this. Like I had a couple of guys right after the Cardinals, and I'm, kind of struggling with like, what is this title thing that now goes with me no matter what I do in life? Like no matter what I am, like I can, I've written kids books. Like Marnie and I've both written kids books, and they're like kids book by first female coach in the NFL, not by Jen Welter, but by first female coach. Like now you have this title, and it is an opportunity and responsibility, and I hold it with a really high regard. And sometimes I would like it to stay away and me to just be Jen, right? But now you have this. And I remember I was struggling a little bit, and I got calls from a couple of my guys on the Cardinals who were like, Coach, people are scared of you. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, like they don't know you like we do. They don't realize you're like the sweetest, funniest person. Like they just hear first female coach and they think you're terrifying. And they're like, you gotta let them see that you're funny, right? Like you gotta cut jokes. You got to let them see what we in the locker room already know, because they'll love you like we do. And I was like, oh, like I can do that? And they're like, yeah, coach, you got to. And I was like, all right. Right. Like, but I had such a hard time with weighing what was such a big, serious title and just a big kid at heart who just happened to be able to play her way into history. Right. Like I struggled with that. And so
they see the intimidating side is what they see. And, I mean, you're the only one like this on the planet, for Pete's sake, or certainly the first. I mean, so you've got to understand that. Unfortunately, we have come to that time of the program that we've got about 30 seconds left of the program. Marjorie, if you got 10 seconds, you want to just tell Jen what a great job she did.
Oh, I thought it was fantastic. Thank you, Jen, for joining us.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jen. Like I said, I think that part of it, of Jen's success, is that she says yes. She says yes, and she shows up. And that is, I think that when I think about people that are successful and that are leaders, they're like, yep, I'll do it. Sure. Whatever you need, whenever you want, I'm there. I'm in, sleeves rolled up, ready to go. So Jen, you exemplify that. And, I'm proud to call you my friend, and that I know you and my mom share a title of being the first. And that's something really unique. And I'm really proud of that for both of you.
Would you come by and join us again sometime?
Absolutely. Anytime.
Okay. Well, that's what we simply say to the rock star of the day. I mean, you're unbelievable. And we can't thank you enough, Jen. Continued success. Stay safe. Be well. Marjorie, Marnie, thank you much. I'm Scott. Till next time on another edition of Journey Through Sports and Life. Indeed, stay well and be safe. So long, everybody.